Okay. So.
Everyone here is here for training?
I think so, yeah.
You got attendance? We're going to mark it for you?
I wrote them down, but I haven't actually. I don't have powers to access the sheet, so.
Alright, I'll just put them in the table. Sorry.
I think we're only missing Yuri, who signed up, but he's not here. That's fine. If he shows up late, he shows up late. God damn it, I hate wires. I need a wireless headset now. Fuck this. Thank you for the recommendation. I will look into that. Okay, so more Hornet radar stuff. Hopefully this time we will have more practical information to use, but there's still a couple of bits of theory just we should go over, so we're not, you know, pulling our hair out when we can't see something on the radar because we're doing dumb things. But anyway, let's get started, yeah. So we're gonna go start off with some radar fundamentals, basically how the radar works to detect things, what we can do to maximize detection. We're gonna go over what notching does and what electronic countermeasures do to our radar, and off-board tracks. Mainly we're talking about the limitations of the E2 and how it relates to the sensor data it can feed to us and when we can expect to lose it. We'll close off with the real meat of it, which is going to be radar mating, short-range radar mech, and the standard configuration that I would encourage you guys to use because it makes life really easy and managing the air-to-air systems very easy. Or at least easier and less cumbersome than you would think. So, radar fundamentals. Basically, we shoot a radio wave out with a specific pulse. This pulse is something we know, and when it hits something, it bounces back. Now, depending on how the object is moving relative to us, it's going to bounce back with a different frequency. And because we're also moving, we have to take that into account. So we can expect a certain shift in the frequency when, you know, we're pointing it towards the ground. This is what's termed ground clutter. So one, we're just emitting our pulse, right? In case two, we've got something with positive closure velocity. That's what V sub C stands for. A closure velocity greater than 0. So when you have something like that, it means that you've got two objects rapidly approaching each other. If you're familiar with the Doppler effect, which, you know, it's like, hey, there's a siren moving across the road. It gets higher pitched as it comes towards you, and it gets lower pitched as it moves away from you. Same thing applies to radio waves. So it'll get blue shifted if something's approaching you, so you get a higher frequency back, and that's how you can tell it's moving towards you. Something that has 0 closure or equivalent closure to your ground speed is going to come back with a neutral frequency shift, or an expected neutral frequency shift, so you can filter that out. So when something is moving perpendicular to you, or your direction of travel, it's moving at the same relative velocity as the ground below you. So that's why you can't see it. That's what a notch is, essentially. You have an object that is moving into that, or is moving relative to the radar such that it can be filtered out based on your own movement. And if something's moving away from you, you'll get another frequency shift. A lower frequency will return because it's moving away from you. Now, there's a whole lot of math and science behind that we're not really going to get into. All you really need to know is that you can see 4 and 2. 3 is much more difficult to see, at least for the radar. So PRF. PRF is the next little component in how you can maximize your radar detection and how the radar sees. So there's 3 modes in the Hornet's radar. there's HPRF, or high pulse repetition frequency, MPRF, medium pulse, and interleaved. So with a high PRF, you can get a longer detection range. I put that little asterisk there because it's specific to fighter-sized targets. If it's a transport, you can probably see that thing from about 80 miles away because it's such a large return. However, because of the way that HPRF works, it requires a higher closure velocity to detect the object, and it's more susceptible to notching because of this requirement. So you'll see something from farther away, but the minute it moves into an aspect that is not so favorable for the radar to determine closure velocity, you'll lose the lock more than likely. MPRF is basically the reverse of this. You're going to have a lower closure velocity required to detect something, so it's less susceptible to notching. However, its maximum detection range is much lower, usually below 30 nautical miles for the Hornet. Interleaved is just mashing these two together. So the way that the Hornet's radar scans, if we can imagine this table here, this box, the beam is going from, say, left to right. So this first beam, this first pass is going to be in high PRF, and then the next beam down, once it cycles, is going to be in medium, and then high, and then medium, and then high. And then once it gets to the bottom of the scan, it'll switch off again. So it'll get every bar in both high and medium at some point. By the end of 2 frames, you will have both a complete HPRF frame and a complete MPRF frame. Now, the reason you want this is because you get a more consistent detection probability, not necessarily a consistent detection range. Sometimes it's desirable, sometimes it's not. Honestly, you'll get more or less the same detection range as HPRF like 9 out of 10 times when you just leave it at interleaved, especially if we're talking about longer range contacts. But that's basically it in a nutshell.
Does detection, does that correlate with like the ability to resolve lock?
Yes and no. So if we're talking real world, I guess the answer would be yes. In terms of DCS, this is just the probability that you'll detect it at a given range. So actually, maybe I'm not understanding the question correctly. So
Like, so example, HPRF, better for longer detection range. So if the target's 45 to 50 miles out, it'll detect it more easily than if it's in medium PRF, right? Does that mean it will also resolve locks easier when you're in HPRF for a longer range target?
I guess the answer would be yes. At least the way the game works, that once you get that first hit, it resolves the lock, so to speak. And if you go into, say, Twiz Auto, it'll automatically manage this for you. So that first hit probability is probably what you're looking for. Does that about answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So, antenna elevation is the next part, and this is something that is not commonly discussed or commonly known. It's absolutely critical. For the APG-73, as it is modeled in DCS, as far as I know, you will get a penalty in the look-down range. So, for every degree of look-down, you're going to decrease the maximum detection range by 3.5%. So, if my maximum detection range was 50 nautical miles here at HPRF, if I'm looking 15 degrees down, I've cut that down to 25 nautical miles already, just by the act of looking down. So be mindful of that, especially if you're going to be scanning below the horizon relative to you. Every degree of look down matters because it's gonna cut your maximum detection range. That first hit probability goes way the fuck down. So obviously the inverse of that is also true. Well, not necessarily true, but lookup target situations are much more favorable. So if you can set yourself up to be slightly below something in a lookup condition, you're going to get a better hit. So notching, we already kind of talked about it. Effectively, what you want to do is you want to reduce that Doppler shift to near zero, or as close as you can get to it, right? So there's two ways to do this, actually. You don't necessarily have to place the emitter at your beam, but you have to reduce your closure velocity to zero. So theoretically, it's not necessarily practical. You could turn cold and match the ground speed of the radar that's trying to lock you, and that would also technically put you into the notch. I've never been good at doing that, and I don't think it's a good plan, but it's a thing that works. So the other thing that will help to drop that lock or foil that lock is to, again, utilize that antenna elevation angle. So I'm not entirely sure if it's just the Hornet that has that detection penalty at look down, but it is true that that radar is going to have a harder time tracking you against ground clutter. So when you have that radar that's trying to track you above you, that's a good place to be. So you put it at your beam and you get below it. It doesn't mean you have to be hugging the ground. It just means below the horizon relative to that radar. So don't go snaking down at 500 feet thinking it's going to save your butt. Not always. It's just going to burn energy. So ECM. If you're being jammed, it's going to deny your range information, and we sort of talked about that in the previous lesson. So you're going to get an angle-only track. So no range. Your missiles are going to be home on jam, less effective pursuit curve. Generally not good things. Burn through range can vary. It's typically between 25 to 20 nautical miles. You'll be able to, again, resolve the lock and burn through the jamming. But at that point, you're well within parameters to shoot, so it's just like, hey, you already kind of know where they're at. If you turn on your jammer, you're going to get that wonderful message on your radar. The ASPJ does disable your own radar emissions while it's in transmit, so be mindful of that. There's that kind of trade-off. Maybe one day we'll get the proper logic for it, disabling itself when you want to shoot something. Who knows? We can dream. But that's about the only things you need to really know for electronic countermeasures. So off-board tracks, or the E2. The E2 is just like any radar. It's highly susceptible to notching because of the type of radar it uses. So conditions 2 and 3 are likely to drop, especially if there's, again, very low closure between it going away from the E2. So as the target maneuvers away from the E2, it doesn't necessarily need to be maneuvering away from its flight path. It's just away from the radar. You can expect that track to drop. I've seen this consistently. So what do we do about that? We should be positioning that surveillance radar in a position to best cover the known points of origin in a hot aspect. So that E2 should be placed directly behind the strike package, in between the strike package and actually behind the strike package in line with that airfield that we know that they're going to take off from. That's going to give us the best probability of detection from the E2 and the best radar coverage. It's also limited in range, about 220 to 230 miles depending, is about what you can expect from it. So if you're 300 miles away from that E2, you can probably expect no real support from that surveillance radar. Any questions on any of the material so far? Seem pretty straightforward. All right, cool. So here's what we really want to talk about. These presets that we're going to talk about here are meant to reduce the amount of pilot workload that you're going to have to do to configure your radar to shoot a missile quickly and effectively. Long-range search is a means to scan a large piece of sky in front of you at long range with a decent enough first hit detection probability at range. And all you're really doing is you're keeping in a range while scan. You're going to select your aim 7. Counterintuitive, but trust me, it'll work out. You're going to set it to 6 bar, so you're going to click that button up there. 140 azimuth. Now it defaults to 4, so you just have to click 6. Push it out to 80 nautical miles, and you're going to set the age limit in the data sublevel to 16 seconds. You can set RAID 1 look as you desire. It's not really required. You can set your declutter as you want, not really a required thing. And you can leave it at interleave PRF because it's, again, reducing our workload. If you really, really need to try and detect something out at like 60 miles that's a fighter, it's unlikely to resolve and you're unlikely to get that hit. But you can try and set it to high. I've never seen it work consistently, so hey, maybe you can make it work. But the next most important thing is your cursor. So your TDC is going to be correlated at 25 miles. I've got mine a little farther out here, but that's essentially what your radar attack page should look like as you're getting it configured. That cursor correlation here, that's what that's called, your cursor correlation range, is going to be important when we talk about mating the radars, and that's going to come a little bit later. So, short range search. Again, it's going to be very similar to long range search, but we're going to reduce the scan range down to 20 nautical miles. And this is when we're selecting our aim 9s. So 6 bar, 80. The Sinatra Pat Pub recommends 140, but at that wide of an azimuth, it takes a lot more than 10 seconds to go through the full frame. So it's a give and take. I still haven't figured out a sweet spot for the short range search. So this is probably going to change back and forth until I can find a consistent way to do this one right here. But you're essentially doing the same thing. You're setting yourself up for a closer in, high probability of detection with your radar. And you're going to just set MPRF because at this point you're looking closer than 30 nautical miles and you want to guarantee detection probability, right? So you want to be able to detect something that's close to flanking, close to beaming, hopefully. And your cursors are going to be at 10 nautical miles, so dead center of the radar attack page. Melded is what you're going to be using to actually shoot. And hopefully we've got, aim 120s for the ops so we can actually shoot 120s. So what you can do is you don't necessarily need to set it to track while scan right away, but you can configure this in range while scan. You can set these same parameters, 2 bar, 80 degrees, 40 nautical miles, same age limit as before. And you can set these, and when you switch from the aim 7 configuration, your LRS configuration, you can get your first LTWIS track on it, resolve the contact, and be like, hey, okay, I see it. And then you can just switch to aim 120s and click TWIS and already be set up to just go TWIS, auto, and you're already tracking your target. And that'll allow you to quickly fire off whatever you need to do. Any questions on the presets? Pretty simple, right?
Yeah, just a quick question.
Sure.
Will we be able to get these slides? Just so I can have a quick reference?
Yes, I don't know how many times I've posted up the link, but I will post it up again. That's all right. Yep.
Whenever you set these up and you hit set, that'll pre-program each of the weapons, correct?
Yes, it'll save the settings per weapon.
So when you were talking about going between the 7, the A7, and the AMRAM, if you just go to that weapon, will it already automatically do that for you?
So you have to configure these initially. That's the only pain in the ass part. But yes, so let's say I switch from aim 7 to aim 120. It will, I won't say should, it will configure it so that it's 2 bar 80 degrees already set up in range while scan at least. All you have to do at that point is switch it to TWIS and press the auto button.
Okay, so it won't automatically have it at TWIS then?
No.
You have to use it. Okay.
No. Unfortunately, that is not currently implemented, and it pains me. So when it all comes together, it sort of looks like this. You'll have your ASL page up on your left screen, your attack radar page up on your right, and your SA page down on your crotch. And it's beautiful, and it works, and you should all use this because it's great.
Signed.
So mating. Mating is a technique to ensure that you have adequate radar coverage between a section. And all it's really doing is splitting up the airspace in front of you into a high block and a low block. So it just gives you an area of responsibility is all it's really doing. So how to do it. You're going to configure for long range search. So what we talked about with the AIM-7. So you're going to configure for this. You're going to set cursors up for 25 nautical miles, your cursor correlation range. And then you're going to configure the radars to scan up or down. The low scan starts at 0 feet AGL, I say again AGL, and up. The high scan starts at 15,000 MSL and up. So you can assign high-low responsibilities as you desire. The way I've tended to do it is lead will take the low block, wing will take the remaining block, and then 3, if you're leading a division, is going to take the high block. So each one of the section leads is going to have an opposing block so that they can both search the opposing blocks. And then 4 is going to take, well, if he's got the high block, 4 is going to take the low block. So low, high, high, low. And that's sort of what the radar page is going to look like. So again, that number that you're looking for is this one right here. So this guy right here is configured for the high block. He's scanning 15 and up. This is something you should be doing, like essentially the minute you've rejoined and are ready to start doing things or like on the route, you should have your radars mated and ready to go. This should be sort of an automatic thing to assume. So short range radar mech. This is a bit of an advanced technique, but really the long and short of it is that you're going to start building a radar picture from close in and build it out. And this happens, as the PatPub suggests, this is going to be used anytime a fighter clears a merge or makes a kill. Honestly, I don't expect this to happen 99% of the time. But this is a really good technique to use when you're like really low SA and you're trying to find something that you know is out there, but you don't know exactly where. You just get told to point in a direction. This will build the radar picture out slowly. So the way it looks is you're going to get told to go a certain heading, right? So you're going to get told, hey, flow 090. And this is going to command you to start clearing that flight path. You're going to, you're going to select your AIM-9s. You're going to go to bore sight, and then you're going to go into wide acquisition mode. So you're going to go down on the weapon select switch, because that's going to select AIM-9s. You're going to go up on the sensor control switch. That's going to put you in bore sight mode, and then you're going to go left on the sensor control switch, and that's going to put you into wide acquisition mode. And you're going to stay in wide ac for about 10 seconds. And these are going to be the longest 10 seconds of your life. And once you're done with that, you're going to get out of ACM modes by just clicking the nose wheel steering undesignate button. That's going to take you out of ACM modes. And then you're going to be pre-configured for short range search with the AIM-9s. You're going to be configured for this.
I love that you told me that because I had to figure out how to get out of ACM for ages because I was too stupid to look it up.
This is why I do these things. So, if you're just doing this by yourself and you don't necessarily have a wingman, you'll start the scan volume centered around your own elevation. So there's two ways to do this. You can do the math, which is hard to do when you're under pressure, or you can be like me and just click the reset button here on the ASL page, and it'll center up the scan volume already on your own ship altitude. It'll zero out the beam elevation and azimuth. And again, you're going to hold that for 10 seconds. Now it says 10 seconds. If I did my math right, that short range configuration should take 10 seconds to go through a full frame. So all 6 bars. And once you're done with the short range set, you're going to move on to the MRM set or the long range set with your AIM-7s. And you're going to set your cursors at 25 nautical miles with, again, still centering the antenna elevation around your own ship altitude. So you don't have to do any elevation fuckery. This should take about 30 seconds. Will it actually take 30 seconds? Probably not. Probably closer to 40. But 30 seconds is the time to shoot for. It's okay if you can't do it in 30 seconds. I still can't do it in 30 seconds. There's a lot to do in 30 seconds. Any questions on this? Or when to use it? Okay, cool. Now we do it as a section. So we're going to do basically the exact same thing up until we get to the short range search configuration. At that point, we're hopefully in TAC form, so we're, you know, 1.5 miles apart or 1 mile apart, and we're both flowing in the same direction. All we have to do now is we're doing the same thing as mating. So one guy's going to take a high block and one guy's going to take a low block. So the guy in the low block, he's going to have his cursor at 10 nautical miles, and the top of his scan is going to be 1,000 feet above his current altitude. So just slightly above, as you can see here. The guy in the high block is going to have the bottom of his scan 1,000 feet below his own altitude. And you're going to complete one full frame. And again, strive for defensive spread if you're doing this as a section. And what this is doing is essentially just expanding the amount of radar coverage that your section can have in this this close-in search environment. And it's imperative that during these processes, so when you're doing short-range radar mech, where does it say it here? Fighters must be disciplined during SRR and ensure that there is no communication being performed. It says no communication being performed between the fighters. The silence is imperative so that the fighter does gain radar SA on a contact, they can immediately ask for declaration from AIC. This is again important because, especially if you get some kind of contact in WIDAC and you have no IFF, this is immediately the time to ask AIC, hey, contact, you know, bra whatever, declare. And if you get that bandit call, you start shooting, you start blasting. It's time to go. That's why that silence is imperative, because if you're stepping each over in comms during that like really tight, this is within 10 nautical miles. This is fight or die situations. That's why that silence is so important, because you need to be able to communicate quickly to AIC, you know, what you have locked up in front of you, so that you don't accidentally shoot a friendly, or that you can capitalize on being able to, you know, get a missile down a bandit's throat. And I don't know why I put this at the end, but it's here at the end. Anyway, that's all I have. I can put up a quick demonstration of what that's supposed to look like real quick. At least all the settings, at least. And all the button mashing. But that about concludes the lesson for today. That's at least all the info I have.
You should set up a little for everybody.
It's really hard to do. So I tend to practice this in like an active pause situation, which is what I'm going to use right now. But this honestly, you can do this all by yourself. The only thing that requires another person is doing it as a section, the short range radar mech anyway. So let me fire this thing up here. There we go. So, to set up for long-range search, all I really have to do is, excuse me, well, I'll put my SA page up down there. All I have to do is select my AIM-7s, and I've got a flare on. So AIM-7s, and what I can do is instead of pressing the button if I don't want to do that, I can just range bump. So all I have to do is put the cursor above the dugout for more than 1 second and then bring it back down. To decrease the range, it's just the opposite. So set up for 4 bar, 16 seconds on the age limit. I'll put RAID 1 look on because I feel like it. And I'm just going to set that. So once I go to 120s, it's at different settings right now, as you can see. However, the minute I switch back to AIM-7s, it's already configured. 6 bar, 140, 80 miles, and the age limits are saved, as you can see up here. So AIM-9s, just bring it down to 20, 6 bar, 16, set it, put it to medium PRF, set that, go to my 120s, double check, hey, it's at medium PRF, all the settings are the same, age limits are good, 120, all I have to do is decrease the azimuth, put it up to, so this right here is the reason you have such terrible default tracking with the AIM-120s. That age limit is set to 4 seconds. So in 4 seconds, if I don't rescan that hit, it's going to drop. That's like 90% of people's gripes with the Hornet's radar. You just set that to 16 or up, and you're fine. And now you're good. So, short-range radar mech. Let's say I just came out of a merge. I don't know where anything is. I'm going to drop all these locks. I don't know where anybody is, right? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my AIM-9s. I'm going to go up to bore site, WIDAC, and then I'm just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Cool. Undesignate. My elevation's already centered. I'm going to let that number up top here go all the way to 6. There's my entire frame. I then go to my long range set, put my cursor down at 25, and again I just let it count up. And there's my entire frame. I've cleared the merge. I have good SA on all the contacts that were around me, and I can start doing things again. I can start looking for my wingmen. I can start looking for lead, whatever I need to do. Now, you basically do the exact same thing as a section, right? Except when you get to the SRM part, say I'm doing the high block, I'm at 19,000 feet, right? So I'm going to move that cursor to be at 18,000, and I'm going to start scanning the high block for my section. If I'm doing the low block, I'm starting at 20 and looking down. And that's all there is to it. Sound good? And if I want to just reset my radar, all I have to do is press that reset button right there. Or not, I have to be in Twiz. Why is it not resetting? Okay, I lied to you guys. There we go. There we go, it's got to be an auto. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys. Yeah. So, yeah, that's the whole point of it. Is like you'll be commanded a flow to, point your nose towards, and that should give you just about enough SA to start doing all your radar mech to try and catch them. But yeah, that's about all I got, guys. Thanks for stopping by. hopefully we'll get through like how to talk to AIC next week and some of that fun stuff. Yeah, so any other questions you guys have, I will open the floor up to you guys.